those that don't know, the IRA stands for an individual retirement account where you can invest however you want in the account with the sole purpose to be for your retirement. And although with the Roth, the amount you contribute into the account is going to be taxed in the year up front, the reason that this is among my favorite investing account is because after you contribute into the account, you can invest however you want, completely tax-free, and once you reach the eligible age of 59 and a half or above, assuming it's been at least 5 years from your first contribution, then everything in the account you can withdraw completely tax-free. But knowing that, there are a few very important things that you have to understand with the Roth IRA, and the first is that there is a limit on how much you can contribute into the account each year. For the year of 2025, the limit is $7,000, and if you are above the age of 50, you can do an extra $1,000, making that $8,000 per year. On top of that, depending on your modified adjusted gross income, the amount you can contribute into the account directly is going to be reduced, and for some, you may not even be eligible. But just know that if you are a high income earner, you could also do what's called a backdoor Roth IRA, where rather than contribute directly to a Roth, you would contribute to a traditional IRA and then convert it to a Roth. You would still have to pay taxes on the conversion, and if you are in this scenario, I highly recommend talking to a financial expert to ensure that you do things properly. Besides that, another great perk about the Roth IRA is that there are no RMDs. This means that the government is never going to force you to withdraw from your account, where with a traditional IRA, you are currently forced to start pulling money out of your account at the age of 73. And also know that with the Roth, since the taxes are paid up front, in the worst scenario, you can withdraw your contributions at any time that you'd like, but I'd highly recommend viewing this account as a hidden treasure chest that you only contribute money into and don't even think about taking money out of. That is at least until you are at retirement. But the reason I say that is because the more time you have for your investments to compound, that is going to allow your money to grow more and more over time. So after all the years of investing and growing your portfolio, why not avoid taxes completely at the end? And so because I have my Roth IRA on Fidelity and have created plenty of content on their platform, here is why I choose Fidelity. For starters, please understand that I am not affiliated with Fidelity, although I wish I was. This is just my honest opinion after using their platform for many years. Which, while I mention it, if you do find value in this content, all I ask is that you consider hitting the like and subscribe button for future content like this. But when it comes to the platform, understand that there are many other great brokerages that you could use. But for retirement services alone, I specifically am a fan of the old school brokerage firms like Charles Schwab, Vanguard, and Fidelity. The reason I feel this way is because I believe the reputation they've built in the investment industry throughout all the years is among the best, and I've also felt it to be more professional and easier to focus on long-term investing when using an account like these. So fun fact, but Fidelity alone has been around since 1946 with over 75 years of service in the industry, where they right now have more than 77,000 associates with a global presence across 11 countries and over $15 trillion in assets under their administration, with 3.5 million daily trades by their customers, which is up 35% from the year of 2023. Plus, I personally think that they have great customer service and some of the best index mutual funds that require no minimum investment like Vanguard's, and many of them are among the cheapest in the industry. In fact, Fidelity was the first in the industry to offer zero-fee index mutual funds. And they also have helpful tools where you can set up automatic investments and the ability to direct exactly where you want your dividends from any of their index mutual funds to go toward. But for those that don't know, anytime you hear the words mutual funds, ETFs, or index funds, these are pretty much investments that contain hundreds to thousands of different stocks so that you can gain a broad amount of exposure all within one purchase. And while speaking of investments, in order to build $1 million and up Roth IRA, here are some of the best investments you may want to consider for growth. First off, understand that I am specifically saying investments for growth because with a retirement account like this, for many of you, you will not be touching the funds for many years. So investing for long-term, safe, yet strong growth potential could make a huge difference over time, even if it's just 1%. The biggest reason I'm mentioning this is because when I initially started investing in my Roth IRA, I wanted to diversify my investments, so I included a bond fund. It sounds pretty good, but after a few years, all it did was make me realize that I could have done way better with a strong, simple index fund that actually is proven to achieve great returns over time. And I will say I've created many other videos on Fidelity, so if you are interested, I'll have some of the most relevant ones and my playlist linked in the description below. But the first investment to mention here is the S&P 500, and through Fidelity, that is seen as the Fidelity S&P 500 Index Fund with the ticker FXAIX. So by investing into an S&P 500 index fund like this, you are able to invest into 500 of the largest publicly traded companies based in the US US, and since 1957, the S&P 500 index has achieved over a 10% annual return, which recently we've had a great market because over the past 10 years, the fund has achieved a 13.75% annual return. And do know that this index is market cap weighted, which means the companies that are in the fund are given weight based on their size. So if we look at the top 10 companies, you'll see ones you probably heard of, such as Apple, Microsoft, and Nvidia, which each contain about 6 to 7% of the entire fund. So think of it as when you buy the S&P 500, 7% of your investment is going into Apple stock. And also know that the top 10 holdings here make up roughly 36% of the entire fund. But if you want to gain more exposure to the US stock market, rather than 500 companies that are the largest ones, you can invest into the Fidelity Total Market Index Fund, which allows you to gain access to over 3,000 holdings that range from small, medium, to large cap size stocks. Understand that there is plenty of overlap between these funds because you can see the top 10 holdings here are the same as the S&P 500, and that if we look at the top 10 alone as a percentage, they make up roughly 31% of the entire fund, where the S&P 500 was 36%. So because there's more diversification, there could potentially be less risk, but also less reward because over the past 10 years, the fund has averaged a 13.16% annual return. So understand that the S&P 500 is greatly used as the average stock market benchmark for data purposes, but if you want a simpler portfolio with more exposure, you may simply want to just buy a total stock market index fund and not even think twice. I made a complete video on the difference in great detail, but I will say in my own Roth IRA, I personally prefer to own an index fund for each the small, mid, and large cap exposure. The small cap is through the ticker FSSNX, the mid cap is FSMDX, and the large cap is FXAIX. But another investment I own that you may want to consider is the Fidelity Large Cap Growth Index Fund with the ticker FSPGX. Now this fund is solely focused on large cap companies with growth style characteristics, so there's going to be a ton of overlap between this and an investment like the S&P 500 because the top companies are Apple, Microsoft, and Nvidia, and if you look at how much they make up, the top 10 holdings cover roughly 60% of the entire fund. If that sounds risky, that is why there is more opportunity for reward, and yet alone with an index fund like this, the companies are going to automatically change over time based off of the market conditions. So because of that, you don't have to rely on one stock, but crazy enough, since the fund was publicly created in 2016, it has averaged an 18.75% annual return. That means if you invested $10,000 in 2016 into this fund, your investment would now be worth roughly $44,000. Although I don't expect the growth to stay this high, if you do believe in the US economy and that all the companies that are powering the future are going to continue growing, then so will your investment. But even though these companies are worldwide and provide so much exposure, the last Fidelity Index Fund I currently own a very small amount of is the Fidelity Total International Fund with the ticker FTIHX. Now this fund includes companies that are listed outside of the United States and provides exposure to over 5,000 holdings, where each one contains a very small percentage of the weight. Now, US stock historically has proven to do better than international stock, but there have been periods of times where international has outperformed, but over the past few years, international has definitely underperformed the US because the average return is just over 6% that it has achieved since it was publicly created in 2016. So although this is my smallest holding and I'm all for US stocks, I personally like knowing that I at least have some exposure to companies that are based outside of the United States. Now there are many more investments that you could consider, but I personally have found that the simpler, more boring stuff is actually what works best, especially when you give your investments time in the market. Like I said, because I have so many years until I'm going to touch my funds, I'm not even considering any bonds or dividend investments in this account, and everything I own is currently meant for strong yet safe long-term growth. Now before I show numbers, if you are just now getting started with a Roth IRA, it's very simple to do. You can do it completely on your own, and all you need to do is fill out a few questions, which I made an entire video explaining on how you can get started. Fidelity is nice because it does show a progress bar for how much you have contributed in the given year, and if you didn't know, you can contribute into the previous year's amount all the way up until the tax deadline, which is mid-April. But to keep things simple, let's say that you're currently age 30 and you want to have $1 million Roth IRA by the time that you are 60 and eligible to do so. In order to actually make this possible, you would need to contribute the maximum contribution amount of $7,000 per year, which is equivalent to $583 per month for the next 30 years, and average the stock market benchmark of around 10%. This may sound like a lot, but a 100% tax-free $1 million portfolio, I believe, is at least worth it. And also realize that over time, the contribution limits increase. In fact, in 2004, the amount you could contribute was only $3,000 per year. So if you eventually contribute even more, the time it would take you to reach a $1 million portfolio would be reduced. But as of right now, if you only contributed $7,000 per year and average that 10% annual return, the soonest that you would reach a $1 million portfolio would take you 29 years. And with many reports showing that the average retirement age is 62, this means that if you are just starting your Roth IRA now and are at the age of 33 or younger and hit the contribution every month, you are likely to have a $1 million Roth IRA by the time that you retire. And also realize even if you are above that age, there are no RMDs with the Roth, so you don't have to withdraw money out of the account, so you could let it continue growing over time. But the biggest point to understand about all this is that inflation has among the biggest impact for those retired, so understanding how much you need saved is extremely important. But if you are 30 right now with an average inflation of 2.5%, that means a $1 million portfolio in today's economy would need to be worth $2.6 million in 30 years. So a $1 million Roth IRA in 30 years is not likely to be enough for you to live off of, so you're really going to want to make sure that you also take advantage of a 401k or other tax advantage investing accounts. If you want to check out my free index fund cheat sheet or how to build an investment portfolio, I highly recommend checking that out as well. And if you want to see how I allocate each of my investments and other exclusive content, consider checking out the Patreon that I'll have linked in the description below. And as always, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and notifications button for future content like this.